Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me weekly as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. A solopreneur is someone like me, and maybe you, who is self-employed and runs their own business. According to Forbes, the number of businesses operated by one person is on the rise. The article goes on to say, quote, "It's not just a trend, it's a movement being fueled by the tech revolution." However, many startups fail, up to 90%, says Investopedia. Helping to drive down these shutdowns and inspire owners to succeed is business coach Niiamah Ashong. Niiamah not only coaches solopreneurs on a one-to-one basis, but he also hosts a weekly gathering of what he calls outliers. Niiamah is here to discuss the advantages of solopreneurship, how to build a thriving business, and he tells us why being an outlier is important. It's a pleasure to welcome Niiamah Ashong to the show. Hi, Niiamah.
Hello there, Fabio. Thank you so much for the invitation and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. So in that same Forbes article, it said that in the US, that a growing share of American businesses are run by solopreneurs, increasing from 76% in 1997 to 84% in 2020. Why do you think there's been such a rise in solopreneurs?
The thing that comes to me around this has just been around the ease of doing this, like to ease and access. So in terms of what it takes to be able to start a business now, there's less capital that's required. There's more people who have done it. There's more availability of resources, of experience, of stories, of mentors. There's a lot of resources that are available here. So I see that the barriers to entry have never been lower, right? And I'm not sure what actually constitutes a solopreneur in terms of that specific definition, but if I even just think about starting up a Shopify store or being able to sell your goods and services on the internet, it's just readily available right now.
I also read that often it has to do with disillusionment with the corporate world and the need to follow personal passions. Do you think the pandemic had a role in this?
Yeah, so I think the three of those things go hand in hand. Not only is there disillusionment, but there's an outlet to go through. There's an opportunity that's available here, and I absolutely feel that the pandemic had something to do with it. My experience at that time, I was already working for myself, and my experience when I was talking to people was that there was an opportunity for people to actually get a chance to almost like write a line within themselves. I found more people were taking time to do more meditation, more wellness, like slowing down and really seeing like what was important for them because they had the opportunity to break out of their normal paths. And as a result of that, new questions came up and we had time. We had time on our hands to start playing with and start exploring and seeing what else can come from it. So I absolutely I feel there's a connection. I spend a lot of time right now with a lot of podcasters and a number of people who say I started my podcast in 2020. Most of them I talk to right now have begun in that era. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation in my mind.
What about the assertion that technology had a role to play?
To me, I feel like we're at a really awesome time period where like it's like the confluence of I look at it as ease. I look at it as both ease and risk, right? Back in the day, at least my understanding, I didn't live back then. But back in the day, my understanding of it was, you needed to have a business plan that was like set out for 10 years. You had to go to a bank in order to go get funds, in order to go and get a loan and be able to get things started. Nowadays, technology is making it easier to just put your proverbial sign up and say, hey, I'm open for business. That comes with websites, that comes with really make it easy for new people to come in contact with you for your services. But on top of it, there we have marketing that's handled. We have sales that's handled. You can do all the different components of your business can be actually addressed through technology now, or at least if not fully addressed, it can be augmented and supported through it. Even on my end, I like working with people. I'm both a systems person and a people person. But being able to go to places and see the rise of the gig economy and freelancers and the ability to get access to contractors and people of high skill on a fractional basis in order to help build out the components of what you're looking to build. Without the technology, we would really just be limited to those who are directly around us.
And I do agree that it's easy. I mean, setting up a website is easier. I remember that in the day I had another business before and I had to hire a web developer. And now, I could just get a service provider that has templates and I could just play around with that. So I don't need to have the technical knowledge. And now that we have social media, as you said, you just put up the board and say that, we're open for business. So those aspects are easier for sure. But just even in terms of like when I reflect on just even setting up the business, like legally, setting it up with the government, right? Everything is done online. So that part is also easy. And then I guess the other element of it is too, is now that we're in the AI world, a lot of the functions are so automated and it makes things so much easier.
Yeah, so if you're talking to someone who like has embraced in a lot of different ways technology. I like to be on the cutting edge. Right? And even with that though, there's still so much available. So when I think about utilizing AI and just even my own business, there are tasks that I used to have to spend hours on that I can now have like AI get done in mere minutes. I still have to spend additional time to make sure it's at the quality that I want it to be at, but it's available. And I see this happening with solopreneurs all around, where it's like there are things that we used to have to do or even hire out for that AI has helped to facilitate. But on top of that, this has become a new like passion of mine, or like I won't even say it's new. I think I'm just actually allowing people to see it now. I used to hide this given the work that I did, but the ability to build and connect systems is also something that's been really, really massive. Nowadays, it's not when you're working with technology, you're able to set things up so that multiple steps are able to take place from just one initial input. I look at AI in this case here to help me fill up some of the steps as well as to help me conceptualize how to get it done. So in the past, I mean, if I had to go to like a strategy consultant or take like a full day to do like a strategy day, and I can go back and forth with the AI and actually engage in a full conversation to help me see opportunities that weren't there and have access to information readily available. So yeah, a lot of the people I work with are in like the information space, right? So I'm not even like thinking or talking about this in terms of how this is being leveraged in everyday services like lawn care and beyond, right? It's just prevalent. It's here.
And even beyond AI, like I was just even reflecting, like just from the 90s to now,
Mm,
we are holding computers in our hands. We have mobile devices. We now have computers that are small, like laptops, whereas before, you'd have to lug around a large CPU. People are
hmm
largely working from home and they have that flexibility to do so. So I think that all feeds into it. And then when you add on the layer, just general mobility, being able to work from a cafe or another country and just relying on the Wi-Fi. There is such an ease, you mentioned the word ease, to be able to work. And for the solopreneur, it makes things, I guess, a little bit more inexpensive, right?
Oh, absolutely. So like I think that's the thing. It's a confluence of many different things all coming in. I heard someone say it's like there's never been a better time to start a business because like the risk is lower. The like it's almost like going down the street and there's just green lights ahead. It's not to say that entrepreneurship in itself or solopreneurship doesn't have risks, but in terms of the barriers to getting you in the game, those have significantly reduced. In terms of what do you do once you have actually like legally filed for your business, there's resources available. There's even just like we're talking right now on a podcast. I have come to really love the form of podcast because I realize how accessible it makes things. All you need is one of these phones and an internet connection, and you can just like you can listen, you can learn, you can gain knowledge, but you can also gain the feeling inside of like, oh, I'm not alone, or maybe the calibration. I would almost say like the mentorship that comes from being able to have access to people. So yeah, it's a really wonderful time for that component of it, and because of the ease that has come up from the internet overall, you can actually find exactly the help that you need for wherever you are in the stage of your journey in many different ways, whether it's through technology, through courses, through agencies or hiring employees or contractors. Like the opportunity is there. I see people are actually walking into it.
What you're talking about are the advantages of solopreneurship. Outside of what you've listed, what other advantages do you see?
Let me actually like really reflect on this here because I've worked in large consulting organizations, high tech organizations as well. And the way I would almost say this, Fabio, is that every type of business has its own advantage, right? Depending on how you look at it. The thing about solopreneurship that I would also say is that like at a certain point, it makes sense to grow beyond yourself. So I want to make sure I put that into the conversation as well, where there may be a certain point where you're like, oh, I actually want to have a team. And when I look at solopreneurship and the people who identify as solopreneurs, oftentimes they do have a team, but they're not local with them. So they're not the only one, but they may have a person that is helping them run their business as an operations person, maybe a virtual assistant or an online business manager, for example. Right? I've recognized that like they still self-identify as a solopreneur, even if they're getting some support. I think it's in the nature of that individual is making things come to life as opposed to really building out a company around it all. And there's just nuances. So people will have their own experience with it. So I wanted to start that first because I realized that without that definition here, we may not be saying the same things. The things that show up for me are freedom. So at this point here, when you're a solopreneur, like you're really just answering to yourself. And so you get to have the freedom to build your business in the way that you want to. You don't have to worry about like shareholders or a board of directors and things like that. Like it's you, right? You get to drive it. Now, everything I say is the advantages. There's another side. There's another side to it as well, where it's like it is just you, right? But you get that. You got to set your own hours. You got to be location independent. It's a whole world of freedom that really shows up from that place. Another side of it too is that like in terms of you get, let's say, 100% of the reward, right? So in terms of the profit that's out there that comes from the business, you're in a position where you're not sharing it off with others. There's not others sharing in the equity of the business. Now, at the same time, there's not others sharing in the risk of the business. However, so one of the advantages that you do have is that you can have that take place. And the cool thing is that you can start off as a solopreneur and grow it into something much larger, but you can start with what you can start with, and I think that's one of the things that you can have an idea on day one, and by the end of that day, be out there in business. And I think that if you're building something much larger, there's a bigger process involved, bringing on investors, creating different things around that, and just getting the investment to even start doing the rest of the work. And so that's when I think about solopreneurship, that those are some of like the bigger benefits there. And especially when I think about it from like the internet side of things, you get to lean into more of what it is that you want to do and be able to say, this is my unique footprint that I'm putting out into the world.
I get what you say about how a solopreneur might want to grow their business, grow their team, as they move along. That being said, what I will say is that, it does really open the door for solopreneurs to have collaborations with other solopreneurs.
Oh,
So
yes.
that if I need somebody to sort of perform a certain function that's their core business, then I can hire that person to do that. And, they might need me for, what my subject matter expertise is. So there is that aspect as well, too, in terms of solopreneurs being able to support one another from a collaborative perspective without necessarily compromising the business model.
Absolutely. This is where I go back to the freedom part, right? You get the freedom to relate, the freedom to collaborate, the freedom to come up with an idea and bring it out to life. And yes, there's a solo part, but I also try not to like overly fixate on the solo part as doing it alone. I think there's something about being a solopreneur. It's an interesting combination. It's like you can be a solopreneur, but you don't got to do it alone. And oftentimes for the goals that we have as entrepreneurs, six, seven-figure businesses and beyond, it's not something that one person does all on their own. Even if it's being able to outsource a certain part of the work that they do, we're in it with more than one person. Whether it's collaboration, whether it's working with different contractors and people in the gig economy, whether it's finding different partners, whether it's having affiliates that are bringing traffic to you so that you aren't the only person standing outside and trying to get people to find out about you. I would almost say being a solopreneur doesn't mean that you have to be doing it alone. It doesn't mean that you have to be lonely in it. You can still build a robust business with others and still consider yourself a solopreneur throughout.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, I've read and I've heard that for anybody who has a business, that it's very important to collaborate. And without doing the collaboration, without forming a community, it's not impossible, but it creates a barrier for growth and success in a business to be able to do that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that you did mention the point about investors and getting financing. I find that now more than ever, running a business is more democratized. Like we are able to crowdfund, for example, if there's a specific project or an aspect of our business that we need funding for, and people will invest out of their own pockets. So the idea of having to go to a bank is something that we don't necessarily need to do in the same way that we used to.
As we're talking about this, what's coming to mind is like, what is your goal? What is it that you're actually looking to create out there? And to the extent that you know what your goal is, the barriers to entry are so much lower and the resources are so much more plentiful that it can you can make it happen. So whether you're crowdsourcing, whether you're crowdfunding, like if that's part of the goal, then part of the goal needs some external investment. There's still ways that you can go about doing it. The key here for me ends up being what is it that you're looking to create? And from that, what are some of the best vehicles for you in order to bring that creation out to life? There's some things that like just aren't best made for solopreneurship. It's like, hey, I want to go and change the world through this awesome tech platform. It's like, go get some people with you, you know? Like there's things that can come in, but there's a lot of businesses that a solopreneurship is absolutely perfect for. And so I like to look at it from that perspective because it's the blessing and curse of freedom and access to this and being born at this time and like in the world where we can readily make these things happen. It's like now that comes with a choice. But luckily there are ways to be able to make your version of your business come to life.
The reason I focus on solopreneurs is because a lot of people are doing it. And
Yeah.
statistically, it really is on the rise. And now that we are living in a world where people are trying to remove their overhead cost, and there's this concept of the digital nomad, right? So people want to reinvest into their business in a way that is smart, where they do not have to run unnecessary expenses. And because of the rise of this and because of your exposure in dealing and working with solopreneurs, I felt that that was a really good angle to approach this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think because I've worked with so many people, I think I see the world of solopreneurship as very vast, where it's like we could be talking about the individual freelancer, we could be talking about a coach, we could be talking about a speaker, we could be talking about someone who actually, especially now with technology, like you could be doing your own products, e-commerce. There's many different ways to like to be a solopreneur nowadays. And I think that as we're talking here, I want to speak to the realm of it all, but also just given my experience, I've noticed that like there are certain industries or certain paths of solopreneurship that naturally start to expand themselves out. And this is where I think it comes back to that end vision of what you want for the business you want. Some people are like, I can get started right now as a solopreneur. I'll start getting in income, start getting clients, and wow, it soon becomes bigger than what they had expected, and it grows out from there. Other people are like, I want this lifestyle. I want to be a digital nomad, for example. Like that's an awesome like type of solopreneurship. And they're like, in order to do that, there's a certain amount of money or a certain amount of reach and overhead that I want to take on, lest I then have to then start worrying about payroll and start worrying about all these things that took me out of the reason why I wanted to do this business in the first place. I think I'm sensitive to some of the various means in which solopreneurship can actually be brought to life in its fruition. I'll speak more to like the element of like the coaches, the consultants, the people who are running like some businesses from that perspective. I can speak to that because a lot of people come my way around that. I think the thing is, having done this for so long, I really respect what it takes to be a solopreneur. And I get excited for those who are open enough or willing enough to change their identity from a solopreneur. I want to create space for that in this conversation.
I really enjoyed looking at the stats for this. There's another stat that I just want to bring up, and that is, and this is according to Leapmesh, that only 20% of solopreneurs earn between 100 to 300K per year. And another site called Side Hustle Science says that the average income of a solopreneur is 69K. So let's get into the meat of the numbers. What does it take for a solopreneur to get from $0 to 69K? And then what's the extra push that gets them to that 100K plus range?
So there's a couple different things that come in. And again, it's going to change based on like what it is that they're doing. There's a few different things that show up though. One of them is just where you live, right? Like your actual circumstances. With a number of solopreneurs, they're like, if I can make 5,000 a month, some of them are doing it on the side, and some of them are like, I want to actually replace my full time, but I only really need 60, 70K to be good based on their living situations where they are in the world, like so on and so forth. They're like, this is what I would need in order to get to potentially what their real goal is, which is freedom, for example. A lot of them are not in there to become the richest person out there. If that's the case, like solopreneurship is not necessarily the best vehicle for that, right? I think that the financial component of it plays its own, it's not the only metric of success for them in that case. And some of the things that I would say in terms of like the extra push becomes really what would you want to build for your life, and where does that come into play? There are other things that are playing out for me as you say this too. Now I don't have the stats in front of me, but I've often heard it said, at least anecdotally, that like 70K, if you're making $70,000 USD, you're typically in a place where your needs are met. You're at like a good livable wage without having to like you can be comfortable with 70K. Now, I think people can listen to this and be like, I have 70K, I'm not comfortable yet. But that was something that I heard. And so it actually doesn't surprise me when you say like 69K. I'm like, yeah, that seems to be like the range. There's like, hey, let's get to this. If we get to this, I'm good. There's more nuance that I would pull out beyond like the actual drive of the person. Most people I talk to are like, hey, look, 10K a month would be great, right? And so it's more than 100K, but let's say 10K. That's often a goal for people to reach too. I think the thing that's interesting is as I've been doing this, some of the things that come down to like the difference may not even be a bigger drive or push. It just might be like how they've actually set their businesses up. I meet with a lot of solopreneurs, and the first time that we have conversations, I like to understand their goals and also get to come up with a roadmap, a way to accomplish it. And so I've been having these conversations with dozens, if not hundreds of people so far. And what I've been finding is that a number of them don't actually understand the math or the economics to get to their goal. So they end up selling products that really end up being really hard in order to get to that, let's say 10K a month level. They're like, oh, I'm selling this thing for $20 or $50 here, and it's custom made jewelry. It's like, okay, there's a lot of customers you need to get each month in order to make that happen. When I look at it, it's like how they actually set up their offers in a way that can sustain and actually get them to that number. Some people are just not charging enough, or that they're doing one-off elements as opposed to finding some ways to have reoccurring revenue that's in there. I'll pause it at that. I don't want to oversimplify it, but from my experience, a lot of times it can just come down to that. You have traffic, they have people coming in, and it's like the way that they're selling it is not optimized for ongoing revenue.
So I want to mention that the stats that were easiest for me to find online were for the United States. So to my listeners tuning in from Canada and around the world, let me know your thoughts on this topic. Are solopreneurs a thing where you live? Are you a solopreneur? What trends and maybe challenges have you been noticing? Just look me up on Instagram at the Stumbling Spirit and DM me. What do you believe are the main reasons why businesses fail?
For fear of sounding too simplistic around it, like they run out of money, right? And I like sometimes I like to just like call that out. They just run out of money, all right? But then sometimes they run out of steam, like the entrepreneur, especially as a solopreneur. Like we're looking at this here, there's no other engine a lot of times except for us, right? So that solopreneur runs out of steam. One of the things I love to work with my clients on is like, how do you create something that can be sustainable without you? So another way of looking at it is that they don't build systems or build systematically. They may have processes in place, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've built systems and systems that can work without them. And so if something happens to the solopreneur in particular, so I'm looking at this from the solopreneur lens rather than all businesses. So I'll look at it from that lens. If something happens to the solopreneur, then the business itself goes down because the business and the solopreneur were so deeply tied in with each other. And if that solopreneur loses interest along the way, that also plays out. Other things that I see, at least with my clients here, is an element of misaligned expectations and reality. So the expectations part being that, okay, I'm going to come into the game and within 6 months, I'm going to be making XYZ dollars, or expectations being that I can make this number and I can do it on 1 hour a week of work and a bunch of different constraints in there. And not to say that, Fabio, like this isn't possible, but it's the expectations versus like the reality of the amount of effort that is in there. And I think that oftentimes as people come in, as easy as it is to get in terms of the barriers being down, on the other side of it, the promise of success. I think that the promotional promise of success has actually risen as well. And so as a solopreneur myself, like we're often brought in with the allure of like it would be easier, it'd be so much faster. You can make this amount of money so quickly. You can do exactly follow your passion, so on and so forth. All those things are available, but I often find that going back even like to that element of like breaking down what will it take to make 10K a month here. I think people are shocked sometimes, but shocked to realize like, oh, if I want to bring this to life, this is the amount of work it will actually take. And yes, I'm able to do this on the beach anywhere I want, but I'm still working. And it's not so I had heard someone say, if you want to make passive income, you have to first make active income. I think the expectation is I'm going to come in, I'm going to write a book, and it's going to sell forever, and I'm just going to be able to be done. And that I think is the biggest disconnect from a solopreneur perspective. Curious what comes to you as I say this.
Well, what I heard you say is that there are three things that you've noticed. One is that people run out of money, two is that they run out of steam, and three, that they had misaligned expectations. And those were drivers as to why their businesses failed. What I also read, and this was on Investopedia, is that other reasons include catering to the wrong market, lack of research, lack of expertise. I was surprised to read that, and bad marketing.
The lack of expertise part is the part that I want to go into because you had talked about like your surprise reason. I heard somewhere that someone described entrepreneurship, and they described it. They were talking to a bunch of college students and university students, and they came in there and they said, "Hey, look, all of you, you are all in a good university right now, but there's going to be some of you who are going to get top marks and graduate with honors and beyond, magna cum laude and beyond, and there's going to be some of y'all that are going to flunk, and some of y'all are just going to get by, right?" It's like you'll be surprised, but that's the same game out in business, right? It's like you all have access to the same classes, same things out there, but there's going to be people who choose to excel in various ways along with it, right? And I think that like that lack of expertise part actually, to me, when I think about it in that context, because I'm like, oh, there are people who are in the same field as you that might be C players that maybe are good with promotion but can't actually deliver on the product. It's business is really interesting in terms of like how if you don't have all the pieces coming together, you might be able to skip a couple, like one of those movies where you have to cross a bridge over a big canyon. And it feels like sometimes like business, like it's like, all right, I can lay down the planks to get from one side to the other, but sometimes you come to a place where the gap is too far between where you are and where you need to put the next plank down or where you need to make the next jump at. And so you have to go back and then go build new skills. Fabio, that's been one of the most humbling parts of business here for me. It's not to say that I didn't expect that I had to learn skills, but I just didn't realize how many more skills were required than what I thought. I didn't realize like the process of what it took to build new skills and to be able to do it in a way that is sustainable so that it's not so you yourself don't get burned out because if you're a solopreneur, like you are again, like are the lifeblood of the business in many different cases. Right. And so taking care of you and making sure you're in good shape is paramount. And at the same time, like if it's your energy that's going in and not yours alone, there's way more to the game than just like the effectiveness or the efficiency of what it is that you're building.
Why do businesses succeed?
I feel like I wish like a part of me is like I wish I knew, right? And from one side of things, but I think that there are only a few businesses that have like really gone off to be like truly successful. And I think that again, it's important to define what succeed means. Like is succeed in that the business got sold, is succeed in that the business continues to exist, that it grew beyond just the individual person. So I'm not going to go into like the details around it all, but I like to look at it from that standpoint because there are a lot of businesses that have been purchased by others that honestly didn't really succeed. They like they were sold as a way out by someone who's like, you're not doing this right. But if I will buy this at a discount and then just fix all your problems because you have figured out something with at least a customer base, for example. So it's a tricky thing when I think about the concept of business succeeding. What does come to me right now, Fabio, it's a bit more high level than anything, but I think about the concept of the infinite game and the finite game. I was first introduced to it by Simon Sinek, but it's a concept that's been around for a lot longer. They talk about having two types of games. A finite game is a game where like the players are known, the ways to win are known. It exists for there's a beginning and end associated with it, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty concrete in terms of how the game is played. An infinite game is where the players are unknown. There's no real clear way of winning or losing. There is no start or end time. And so an example of this might be, a specific game of, let's say, football. Like what time the game starts, how long like the game goes. It's like, okay, even if there's overtime, the rules around it, how many players are allowed to be there, what the rules are, so on and so forth. An infinite game might be more like ending systemic oppression. You know, there's so many different ways to go about it, and so forth. And the thing that comes to mind for me is businesses that succeed in my mind are the ones that play the infinite game. Why is that? So we might have like our quarterly earnings and the various short-term goals that we have in order to make revenue, get dividends, so on and so forth, right? However, in the research I've done, there are things you can do in the short term to make your short-term results look really, really good. However, they aren't sustainable. And oftentimes, when that ends up happening for too long, then it catches up to the business, and the business itself ends up having to close down or sell or whatever it is because it quote unquote failed in this case, right? The businesses that are there for the infinite game, they're looking to say, how does this continue to grow? How does this continue to go on? I like to think about that at this point in my game, especially when I talk to different solopreneurs to like help establish something that continues to live, that has the infrastructure to keep working even when they're not there. And that whereas the finite one's like, I'm trying to make this amount of money. I had this goal in my mind. I just want to do it, whatever it takes. I just want to go do it. And it's like that works until it stops working. And when it stops working, there's nothing left in the business to help sustain it. Curious what you heard from that. You're really good at like synthesizing some of what gets said. So I'm curious what you heard from that, Fabio.
Well, I think sustainability is a key word, which is what you said in the end, right? Like thinking of the long game, having that sort of infinite view into the future of your business. The hard work that you put on the front end is really going to help you in the end in terms of producing a sustainable business. The other thing that I think about is the idea of financial viability, to have the freedom, which is the word that you used earlier, to be able to do the things that you want to do. So, as a solopreneur, when I think about a successful business, I think about sustainability, financial viability, and freedom.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think those three things really line up. It's why probably I'll talk about systems because in my experience, I've noticed that there are some businesses that people just think of as like a novel idea. And they're like, and they say, I'm in business and someone's paid them once, or they haven't actually taken the time to actually really bring in revenue or find out how they can do this on a consistent basis. There are other businesses that I talk to that really, I would almost say like they have more like revenue channels and they have ways to get money in, but it hasn't turned into what I would look at as like a business, which is one of the definitions I thought of is like, not I didn't think of this yet, but what's coming to mind is think of the business as an asset, as its own individual thing that in and of itself, it can run like a machine. That concept has been something that has stuck with me in terms of business and solopreneurship. I think sometimes we, like a lot of us, will create a different way to get money and to get revenue in or to get different kinds of income. And it feels like, oh, because we don't have a boss to answer to, or we can set our own hours or so on and so forth, that like we have like a full on business. But it's like in some ways they can end up just being like a different variation of a job. You're not getting W-2 earnings on it, but in terms of it requiring you in order for it to move forward, that part still exists. You get to choose the parameters of the job, which is cool. But when I think about like a real successful business, it's something where it's like it doesn't need to be making a lot of money, but it just works. With or without, whether you're CEO or you're spending all your time as an owner, or it works. You can take vacations and know that it's still coming through, so on and so forth. As time has gone on, I think that there's something about being able to bring revenue in, which is very important. But then there's another thing to be able to like sustain that over time and to take extended time off. We talk about freedom. I'm like, that feels like real freedom to me, to be able to just like be able to walk away from the business and know that it's good.
So, let's talk about you. What got you into business coaching?
In my life, I've always felt a little bit different. I didn't necessarily fit in. And what got me into business coaching was that I first got into coaching. My university experience was an Ivy League university, and then I went to go work at Deloitte Consultant for 6 years, and then I went to go work in a high tech company that later got acquired by AT&T for like 1.2 billion, man. And so I had been in environments where like I was used to playing around high performers who were out there trying to like either like basically create the future and to be on the leading edge of things. In 2017, I ended up moving to Singapore for what ended up being a number of years. And it was the first time that that I had left what I had been building. So everything I had talked about there, I had been building over the last, I don't know, 12 years. And I had to start all over again when I went out to Singapore. And I didn't realize how much work was going to be involved. I remember saying like, do I want to try and find a way with my company to go work there? They had an office there. I could have done something, but I told myself, well, it's going to be different. If it's going to be different, why not make it just a little bit more different by doing my own thing in my own business? It's a lot of work. And I think the work part is I didn't realize how important or how beneficial having a foundation can be, especially when you're getting started for the first time in it. The reason that all that is important is because I found what it was like to start from scratch, really, and started bringing in my first clients in there. We were like, there was good money, 5-figure clients, long contracts, people coming in and renewing, working with individuals, groups, organizations. It was good. But what I was finding was that it was very unpredictable. And so what was happening was that underneath it all, I had this larger mission, which was to bring together a truly inclusive and empowered world. And I was finding myself being driven by that mission, with people finding me and seeing my journey being an inner journey of connecting to joy and finding more about myself and like really doing the work out loud and bringing people on as coaching clients along it. So a lot of my work was far more rooted in personal development, self-actualization to start out with, and eventually became more into like I started to realize that there was a certain group of people who were getting more success with me than others, and those were the people who had unconventional backgrounds, who were successful but like weren't necessarily not in the conventional ways or traditional ways. So all this brought me into coaching, working with, I'm a leader of leaders. So I was working with higher and higher people who had bigger aspirations. But what was happening here was they were solopreneurs. A lot of them were starting their businesses out for the first time, or they're getting ready to move into business, or they had a business that they've been building for like the last, 2, 3 years. And what one of the things that was really, it really struck me was that it was a challenge of consistently creating revenue so that they can stay in business. Going back to the idea of why do businesses fail, right? They run out of money. And then like just like I know that one because I'm like, my clients were running out of money. And the things at that time, the work we were doing was on a deeper level. However, they were business owners. They were coming into the business. And I was like, I want to make sure that I'm supporting them more directly. Then I realized for myself, when my second child was born, I'm like, my business had too much variation in it. It was something where like it was a little too much feast and famine, and I wanted to have some more predictability for the life we were building. The timing was no longer okay for me to just have it come in on a sporadic basis, and that's when the business coaching really became something that became more of a focus. The real thing here was when that happened for me, I started focusing on my own business and saying, how do I take this from something where I'm getting revenue and I'm making sales, but it is not yet really and truly a business. And it was about like 2 years of working on that before I then came out and said, okay, I will help other people really with their businesses from that place and like actually call myself a business coach. Right now, you're meeting me at a time where I look at these solopreneurs who have great visions, who are desiring freedom and have a chance to really make a difference out in the world. And my heart goes and says, like, I just want you to be able to stay in the game. I just want you to be able to play this game on the infinite level where like if this is what you want, let's make sure that you can keep doing this. Because if we stop, then that's the only way that you lose. Business is not straightforward. The main thing though is like if we can keep you in the game, you will keep learning and you will figure out and like sometimes you just need to stay in the game longer than others to figure out what is necessary and then get what it is that you're here for. So while I still do deep work and development and leadership with people, part of why I decided to lean into more of like the business side of things was because I knew that people have huge impacts that could be made, but they didn't have the infrastructure to be able to do it on a consistent basis. And having been there myself, it became increasingly important for me to make sure people were really, really good.
What do you mean by outlier?
Ah, so I have a math background. And so the concept of an outline for me is someone who is exceptional from the data. The average kind of clusters in a certain area. There's certain expectations, and if it falls within it, you're like, yep, that was to be expected. The outlier is a result that is unexpected, but also not supported by a lot of other pieces of data like it. So an outlier oftentimes is like the one the one result that was 50 times more than everything else, right? And oftentimes those outliers, they're considered throwaway. Okay, well, except for this one outlier, this is where the data is telling us. And I found for myself that more and more in my life, I identified with, and it's not to say that was necessarily the case, but I identified with that feeling of being a part of the group, but not being a part of the center, not being a part of the norm of it, being the outlier alongside of it. To me, the component of being an outlier is really it takes shape for in different ways for different people, but it's really that element of like you're an ordinary person who's done extraordinary things, and you're not trying to be different, but you are outside of the normal data set. A lot of us as outliers are afraid of becoming outsiders, and so we end up diminishing how different we are from those around us. Because if they really found out, if they really knew, that we would go on the other side and not be an outlier in the data set, it would be an outsider altogether, not even considered as part of the data. I love that term. Overall, it's been something that has really just resonated with me. I've tried to walk away from it a few different times, but I keep coming back to it because I have a background in diversity and inclusion. And it never really felt good to me for people to assume that because I'm a black male that I'll go and do like all the African American things that the organization was offering, right? But Outlier was free. It was something I could choose. It was an identity that like I could make my own and make real in any way. And I like to offer it to people, not to make them separate from any others, but to actually give them a chance to be able to speak to a part of the way that they experience life or experience the way that they do things and get support when that is outside of what would work for most other people. So my outliers, they walk their own path. They're creating their own results, and the things that they do, most other people, even if they try to do it exactly the same way, wouldn't have gotten as good results from it. And so I look for the people who are in that space, whether it's leaders, whether it's business owners. It's just that component of like being actually really exceptional. To me, an outlier is the exception. And like what happens when you're the exception to the rule? Great. I look for that.
I mentioned in the intro that you host a weekly meeting called Outliers Edge. Can you describe the Outliers Edge Guild?
Yeah. So you'll find in my world that the guild in particular is my opportunity to bring together outliers from all different walks of life to one cohesive place. We hold it as an online community. A number of them have their own podcasts, they have their own businesses, but they are all like driven with a sense of impact that they're looking to achieve. And we come together to actually co-create with each other. And so, what does that mean? That guild is a group of practitioners, people who are actually out in the world continuing to grow and to level up. Why do I say that? For me, the idea here of an outlier is like, yes, you're exceptional. What would happen if you're going to be an outlier? Why don't we take this to the highest levels possible? So if you're an outlier and you're considered 50x different than others, why not make it 100x? Why not 200x? Like if you can still be a part of the data, what would it look like to really take it as far as we can? And so the guild is a space we meet on a weekly basis, and people come in bringing in the real-time challenges that they have as they continue to grow along their own outlier journey, as they're continuing to grow forward. It's a mastermind in many different ways of exceptional people who are looking to see how do I take this thing about me that's exceptional and then turn it from my own personal experience outline to actually blazing a trail for others, to making it easy for others and to lead others in that same way. So it's been a really wonderful space. We break everything down into like 90-day journeys, and we use that to help guide us and create success from there.
Well, full disclosure, I've joined those calls
Yeah.
and they've been really helpful to me. I mean, not only in terms of validating the things that I'm doing well, but also the areas that I can work on. And I've noticed that it's helped me refine some of my approaches, which is wonderful. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. One of the things I noticed in the Outliers Edge Guild, and maybe it's just the ones that I've participated in, is that a lot of the solopreneurs are in the health, wellness, or holistic spiritual fields. Is there a reason for that?
The space altogether is in the development field and development and transformation. It might have been just on the calls that you're in where like spirituality came up more or like the wellness elements came up more there. But I specifically reach out to people. Let me put it this way. I'm in this for the infinite game. As I go along here, I find that it is helpful for there to be some type of affinity with outliers as we're growing. So while there are different solopreneurs, I'm bringing in people who are coaches, they are motivational speakers, they have a platform. And their platform is that they want to do good in the world. They want to uplift the world. And they have different modalities of doing it. But that right now is my common thread. I'm like, not only are you an outlier, but are you here to blaze trails? Are you here to uplift things? Are you here to help take us to somewhere new? As a result of that, the people that we're bringing in, and we have hundreds of people inside of that group, so it's like it's really quite awesome. The people we're bringing in are aligned in that way. They are outliers even in the way that they're finding solutions. So some people might find like musical therapy as something that lights them up. Some people they're like, oh, we do business coaching. We like I have found people who are just some of the most like personable accountants that have come to join this, and they have their own business that's out there. And they're like, I believe that every business would be better off if they had their finances completely taken care of and they knew how to like stay with it and so forth. So we have a variety of people that come in, but generally speaking, the common thread is like, do you have a mission? Are you up to something here where like you're looking to not play small as it goes along? And I was gonna say for some reason, but I'm like, I know the reason. It's because I actively search and curate this group of people.
I'm just wondering if you could just share. I know you can't get very specific, but I'm wondering if you could share a success story.
One of the ones that's making me really happy right now is I'll share one with one of my clients. We had worked together for about a year, and during that time, that client had left their previous career, which was a career in finance. And when we started working together, they had been working as a coach, a solopreneur, had been coaching in particular for a while, and their goal was to replace their income that they're making in finance. And their packages, the way that they were selling their coaches wasn't in a way that mathematically or economically got them to the results that they were looking for. So let me put it another way, they were undercharging. And in a way, they were a generic coach in terms of what they were offering. They weren't a generic coach in terms of their power and what happened when they were with them, but the way that they were positioning themselves was there. So we worked together to create a business that was really based on that person's like soul mission. There was something that person kept saying out in the world, like this is what I believe, you know. And in our work together, we actually got into a place where that thought that was running through the back of his mind actually became one of the center pillars of his business. And so we actually just met this the other day, and he was sharing like, "Hey, just so you know, the goal that I set out with, I just crossed that goal of making more through my coaching business than I did in finance. And the business that he has is not as generic. It is the business that we set out. So I'm proud of him for the work and for what he built being actually in alignment with what he wanted to build and to reach his own personal milestone around what he wanted to create and the financial amounts that he wanted to bring from there. Like to me, that's it. You figured out how to stay in this game. And the game that you're playing is unique to you. It is your outlier game. There's something different about what he's doing. I beam from that. Like those are the kinds of things that I look for when it comes to the business and work with my clients.
What does resilience mean to you?
Oh, yes. Oh, resilience. Yay. So, to be succinctly, the resilience means the ability to come back after being knocked down or knocked out, like, or knocked out of shape. Not just to come back, but to like reform. Resilience to me also includes, I just have this picture in my mind of someone that is walking down a snowy path and having the wind blow all against them, and they may have their hand out in front of them, but they're not giving up. Being resilient is to stay in the game, regardless of the headwinds that are coming out to you. And in particular, when I think about my outliers and the outliers on the path to trailblazers, resilience is staying in the game while you're navigating the jungle and not knowing like, you know, where your next bit of food is coming in, or you're getting scratched by all these different twigs and all the other dangers that come along with it as you are navigating and walking your own path and continue to stay in the game is it. I think that's really it. If I was going to really boil it down, it comes back to that infinite game. Resilience is staying in the game.
One of the subjects that I'm exploring this season is the connection between resilience and survival, because I believe that they are related. I also
Hmm.
believe that they're different as well.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on this topic in relation to solopreneurship?
Yeah, I think it really comes back to the same elements, right? Resilience and survival, staying in the game. Like my hope for solopreneurs is that not that they just survive and you know they're just like I just barely made payroll each week. You know, I feel like there's a lot of resilience that's involved when you're in that space. But my general spot is how do we help you stay in the game? Because the survival changes over time. Like it might start off with surviving from financial components of it all. However, at another time of it, it might be like survival being like, oh, now I have customers. My product was so successful that now I have more demand than I can actually keep up with. How do I actually deal with that? I have people knocking on my doors and I'm not even able to keep up with the people that are behind me. Like, this is a very stressful time, right? How do I stay in the game? For me, they all really tie in here, but it really comes down to resilience, survival, solopreneurship. All those things boil down to like, how do you stay in the game regardless of the headwinds that are coming against you?
What are your practices of resilience?
One of the bigger practices, and I've actually fallen out of this here, so I have to keep it honest. But one of the biggest ones for me was actually to work on building out my nervous system. There was a meditation or an exercise that was led by a man named John Wineland, who does a lot of men's work. And there was a thing there related to a practice from Qigong, and it was really about opening up a man's nervous system. And that was one of the biggest impacts for me when it comes to resilience, because I felt that I was able to withstand more as it was coming through to me. It also slowed me down to bring more mindfulness into the decision, and not just be reactive, but actually now allow myself to be responsive as well. And then there's a lot of visualization that I think I was also involved in it. The element of visualization for me is it helps me recognize that there's always a path forward. And so as long as I'm playing that path forward, we're good. Last thing I'll say on this one is gratitude. Gratitude has been incredibly useful for me. And like, it's my love language. It's not called one of the love languages, but like, it fills me up. And one of the things I realized, Fabio, is that I need more resilience when I am at a place of when I'm closer to the survival part, meaning that like my tank is low. But I almost describe it like this: like, if I'm at 100% and something comes my way and it's going to take away 10% of that 100, I'm like, I'm good. I'm at 90%. I don't mind. We're fine. But when I'm at like 25 or 30, like, 30%, like I'm barely getting by as it is. I'm at a third of what I could be. And the 10%, something comes and it takes 10%. Well, that's a third of what I had. That's when I feel like I really get hit. And so, how can I fill up my tank before it is necessary? Because if that happens, my relative capacity to withstand and be resilient and stay in the game actually increases.
How can people reach you if they want to contact you?
Yeah, I'm all over the internet just by Niiamah Ashong. That's Niiamah Ashong. And that's me and my personal brand, but it's also really closely related to my business brand, which is Outliers Edge. And you can find me on all the different platforms using Outliers Edge. And I invite people to listen to the Outliers Edge podcast. If you typed in either Outliers Edge or Niiamah Ashong, you will find that. I like to make the Outliers Edge Guild available as well. And you can just go to outliersedge.com/guild. You get a free membership into that program. And that's something that you can come and join us on our weekly mastermind. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much, Niiamah. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your insights, sharing your wisdom, and for helping me and others on their solopreneurship journey.
Thank you, Fabio, for this opportunity and for playing the game that you play.
Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again next week for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.